On Saturday, February 17th, 2024, deputies responded to a domestic disturbance at a residence on the 5500 block of Lakota Trail in Harris County, Texas. Inside, they found 33-year-old Tanasia Bush and rapper Phillip Hickman with serious injuries. According to initial reports, Hickman had been stabbed. Bush had been shot. Both individuals were transported to area hospitals. The residence was secured for investigation. There was no evidence of forced entry. No other individuals were present. No arrests were made at the scene. Later that evening, Tanasia Bush was pronounced dead from the gunshot wound. Phillip Hickman received treatment for a non-life-threatening stab wound and was released the same day. Law enforcement stated that the case would be reviewed by a grand jury. No formal charges had been filed at that time. By the morning of Sunday, February 18th, Phillip Hickman could not be reached. Hours later, he was located by family members in a parked vehicle outside a school on Wood Forest Boulevard. As they approached, Hickman fatally shot himself. Authorities confirmed both deaths and stated that the case was closed. No trial took place. No court judgment was issued. No further investigation was announced. This sequence of events raised several unresolved questions. What led to the physical altercation between Hickman and Bush? Was the use of a firearm considered self-defense under Texas law? Were there previous domestic incidents involving either party? Was law enforcement response adequate after the initial event? Could either death have been prevented? This case involves a domestic dispute followed by a suicide, both within 24 hours. With no surviving parties and limited public records, the events remain largely unexplained. What really happened between Phillip Hickman and Tanasia Bush? Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Tanasia Bush was a 33-year-old woman residing in Spring, Texas, located in Harris County. Publicly available records indicate that she was a mother and a known figure in her community. Though not a celebrity or high-profile individual, she had a visible digital footprint, with personal photos and lifestyle posts across her social media platforms. According to information from acquaintances and online sources, Tanasia was seen as someone focused on her family and daily responsibilities. There are no publicly known criminal records or prior legal disputes associated with her name. However, law enforcement has not released any detailed background suggesting whether she had a history of mental health struggles, stress-related conditions, or therapy interventions. No restraining orders or previously filed domestic violence reports involving her were found. There is no known professional occupation tied to her in public databases or reports. She was not affiliated with any business or institution that issued statements after her death. Phillip Hickman was an emerging artist in the Houston area underground rap scene. While not signed to any major label, he had a growing local presence and was working under an undisclosed stage name. A review of his music platform shows that his lyrics often center around personal struggle, street life, and mental resilience. Several tracks have been uploaded to SoundCloud and YouTube prior to the incident. He had participated in at least one local artist showcase and had posted snippets of performances on his social media accounts. No interviews or mainstream media coverage of his work had surfaced before the case. Phillip's personal background suggests he had aspirations in music, but lacked significant press or promotional exposure. His public behavior was relatively reserved, and there are no reports of previous arrests, violent history, or known emotional instability prior to the events of February 2024. There is also no official documentation of counseling or mental health treatment. Regarding relationships, it remains unclear whether Tanasia was his first long-term partner, though their involvement was described by law enforcement as domestic, indicating cohabitation. No marriage certificate was found between them, nor evidence of children together. Phillip and Tanasia were in a domestic relationship at the time of the incident. Authorities confirmed that they lived together at a residence located on the 5500 block of Lakota Trail in Spring, Texas. No official documentation exists regarding the exact duration of their relationship. Based on social media posts and reports, their partnership had lasted more than a year. There are no documented calls to law enforcement before February 17, 2024, nor any public restraining orders, neighbor complaints, or prior records of disturbance. However, reports suggest that the relationship was private and not heavily discussed in public or online forums. There is no confirmation that either party had children together. It remains unverified if either had children from previous relationships residing in the same home. Have you ever seen signs of conflict that others missed? At what point should people step in when things seem off in a couple? There were no reports of activity from the household that morning. Neighbors did not report any disturbances, and law enforcement received no calls from or related to the residents during the early part of the day. Sometime in the evening, a domestic dispute erupted between Phillip, Hickman, and Tanasia Bush inside their residence. The home was located on the Lakota Trail in Spring, Texas. Details about what triggered the argument remain unclear. Investigators have not released specifics regarding what led to the altercation, and no witness was physically present inside the home at the time of the conflict. The argument escalated quickly. At some point during the dispute, Tanasia reportedly stabbed Phillip with a sharp object. The nature of the object was not disclosed, but it was sufficient to cause a visible arm injury. In what law enforcement labeled as a defensive response, Phillip then retrieved a firearm and shot Tanasia once. Residents nearby reported hearing a loud disturbance and contacted police. First responders from the Harris County Sheriff's Office arrived on the scene shortly after the shooting. Upon arrival, both Phillip and Tanasia were found injured inside the home. Medical units transported both individuals to nearby hospitals. Tanasia was in critical condition from a gunshot wound, and Phillip had a non-life-threatening arm injury. Phillip Hickman was treated and released from medical care. The hospital did not hold him under psychiatric evaluation, and there was no legal order to detain him pending the grand jury's decision on the shooting. Tanasia Bush later died at the hospital due to complications from her injuries. Her death was officially ruled as a homicide pending further review. The Harris County Sheriff's Office released a statement indicating that the case would be referred to a grand jury to determine if any charges were necessary. However, before the legal process could proceed further, Phillip disappeared. Did law enforcement investigate who escalated first? Should Phillip have left instead of firing a gun? How much force is legally considered self-defense in domestic altercations? Shortly after Hickman's release, law enforcement issued a statement confirming that the circumstances surrounding the incident were under active investigation. They stated that the case would be referred to a grand jury to determine whether criminal charges would be necessary. Despite the fatal outcome, no immediate charges were filed. The case remained in an open status pending further review of evidence and statements. According to the Harris County Sheriff's Office, there were no outstanding warrants or restraining orders between the individuals involved. The incident had occurred inside the residence, and there were no external eyewitnesses who had seen the stabbing or shooting unfold. The absence of surveillance footage and a lack of third-party witnesses added complexity to the legal process. No public announcement was made regarding any mental health assessment conducted on Hickman before his release. His emotional state following the incident was not disclosed in any official reports, and law enforcement did not state whether any suicide risk assessments were administered. On February 18th, approximately one day after his release from the hospital, Phillip Hickman was reported missing by family members. According to sources, he had left his location without informing relatives or authorities. His whereabouts remained unknown until he was located later that evening. Hickman was found sitting alone in a vehicle parked at a school lot in the 14700 block of Wood Forest Boulevard. Family members approached the vehicle, attempting to make contact with him. As they neared, Hickman reportedly retrieved a firearm and fatally shot himself in the head in front of his relatives. Emergency services were called to the scene. He was pronounced dead on site. The Harris County Sheriff's Office confirmed that no foul play was suspected. The cause of death was classified as a self-inflicted gunshot wound. No suicide note or written explanation was recovered at the scene or made publicly available by investigators. Authorities stated that the firearm used in the suicide was legally obtained, but they did not specify when or how it came into his possession following his hospital release. It remains unclear whether Hickman was under supervision or evaluation in the 24 hours between his discharge and his death. Was Phillip Hickman afraid of indictment? The case was still under grand jury review, and while no charges were filed, the possibility of being held accountable for Bush's death remained. Could this legal uncertainty have contributed to his decision? Did he feel guilt, or was this a planned end? With no public statements or final notes, it's unknown what motivated Hickman's suicide. Did internal remorse influence his actions, or was it premeditated? Should there have been a psychological evaluation before he was released? Given the trauma of the incident and the legal stakes, would a mandated psychological assessment have detected a mental health risk that could have led to preventive intervention? Following the double fatal outcome, Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzalez addressed the situation publicly. He confirmed both deaths, Bush as a result of gunshot wounds inflicted during a domestic dispute, and Hickman by suicide in a school parking lot. In his official statements, Gonzalez described the events as tragic and extended condolences to the families involved. However, he did not elaborate on specific investigative procedures or timelines. The sheriff's department maintained that the incident was being treated as a domestic disturbance that escalated fatally. As of the last available update, with both individuals deceased, the criminal investigation portion of the case was not expected to proceed to trial. No suspects remain alive to be prosecuted. Law enforcement confirmed that, pending any unexpected forensic findings, the case would be closed with no further legal actions. The grand jury review was effectively terminated due to Hickman's death. With no defendant, there is no path forward for criminal indictment. No detailed forensic report has been released to the public, but investigators confirmed the basic sequence. A physical altercation occurred during which Bush stabbed Hickman. Hickman responded by discharging a firearm, striking Bush. Both were transported for medical treatment. Bush died from her injuries. Hickman survived. No additional weapons were found at the scene apart from the knife and the firearm. Authorities did not publicly reveal the number of stab wounds or bullets fired. No toxicology reports or timelines related to alcohol or drug screening were released. There were no confirmed eyewitnesses to the stabbing or the shooting. The event occurred within a private residence, with no surveillance cameras or video evidence disclosed. This absence of direct observation complicated the investigation and was a primary reason for deferring the case to a grand jury. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices and what sounded like gunfire, but none were able to provide definitive accounts of the sequence of events. Their statements confirmed only that a dispute had occurred. Autopsy details for both individuals were not made public in full. Bush's cause of death was listed as a gunshot wound. Hickman's death was ruled a suicide by self-inflicted gunshot. The exact nature of the wounds, timing of injuries, and other forensic specifics were not disclosed by the county coroner. No other injuries, signs of prolonged struggle, or defensive wounds were confirmed publicly. No drugs or alcohol were referenced as contributing factors. Law enforcement stated that no restraining orders were in place prior to the incident. There were no documented police calls or domestic violence complaints associated with either individual in Harris County public records. This lack of prior contact with authorities indicated the dispute may have escalated suddenly and without warning. Investigators did not confirm whether any private counseling, relationship disputes, or threats were occurring behind closed doors prior to the incident. Friends and family have not released any public information about prior red flags or private concerns. With no history of domestic violence, no restraining orders, and no prior legal intervention, the system had no basis to intervene before the event. However, questions remain. Should more proactive checks have been in place after the first violent event? Should mental health assessments be mandatory for individuals involved in fatal altercations before release? Could access to firearms post-hospital discharge have been restricted? The events surrounding the deaths of Phillip Hickman and Tanasia Bush in February 2024 present a complex legal scenario with multiple unanswered questions. In a matter of hours, what began as a domestic altercation ended with 2 fatalities. This case has since closed with no legal trial and no convictions. However, many legal and societal questions remain. This report breaks down the unresolved legal dimensions, public reactions, and potential digital clues left behind by both individuals before their deaths. In Texas, the law permits the use of deadly force in self-defense under specific circumstances. According to the Harris County Sheriff's Office, Phillip Hickman was stabbed by Tanasia Bush during a heated argument on February 17, 2024. In response, he reportedly shot her. Authorities initially viewed the shooting as a potential act of self-defense. However, Texas law also stipulates that the use of deadly force must be immediately necessary to protect oneself from death or serious bodily harm. While Hickman was released after medical treatment, and no charges were filed at the time, a grand jury was expected to review the case. The absence of charges does not automatically equate to legal justification. In self-defense cases involving intimate partners, each factor, proportionality, imminence, and intent must be assessed. Should individuals who claim self-defense in a domestic incident be immediately cleared without full investigation? Details remain unclear about what initiated the physical violence. No publicly available reports have specified whether Tanasia's actions were defensive or aggressive. Law enforcement did not release a detailed sequence of events. Without witness testimony or video evidence, the context of the stabbing remains speculative. If the stabbing was provoked by a threat or an act of aggression by Hickman, it could be legally framed as an act of defense rather than initiation. However, if unprovoked, it might be treated as an assault. This distinction is crucial in determining legal culpability. Had the case proceeded, can a physical altercation escalate so quickly that both parties act in self-defense? Texas is a stand-your-ground state. This means individuals are not legally required to retreat before using deadly force if they are in a place they have a legal right to be. In domestic settings, stand-your-ground can complicate matters, especially when both individuals live at the same residence. If Phillip was not the aggressor and genuinely feared for his life after being stabbed, stand your ground might support his decision to use his firearm. But these laws also depend on proving that the shooter wasn't the initiator of violence or escalating the situation. On February 18th, just one day after the fatal shooting of Tanasia Bush, Phillip Hickman died by suicide in a school parking lot as his family approached him. The act effectively terminated any potential prosecution, as a deceased individual cannot be charged or tried. The grand jury review, which had not yet taken place, became legally irrelevant. While prosecutors might still examine the case internally, no formal legal proceedings could continue. Should the justice system have acted faster to detain Hickman for investigation before he had the opportunity to flee or take his own life? At the time of Hickman's release from the hospital, he had not been charged with any crime. Without formal arrest or surveillance, law enforcement had no legal authority to detain him. However, this raises broader questions about crisis response protocols. After a domestic fatality and pending investigation, should immediate psychological evaluations or protective holds be mandatory? There is no public information indicating whether law enforcement conducted a threat assessment or if mental health services were offered. Should a survivor in a domestic fatality be held temporarily for mental evaluation during ongoing investigations? As of this report, no official public statements have been released by the families of either Phillip Hickman or Tanasia Bush. Local media noted that both families were present or involved shortly after the incidents, particularly at the scene where Hickman died by suicide. No press conferences or interviews were granted. There is no official reporting on the funeral dates or memorial arrangements for either individual. Both were pronounced dead within 2 days of each other, suggesting that arrangements may have been held within the same week. Due to the nature of the incident, services may have been kept private. Following the news, local Facebook and Instagram users posted mixed reactions. Some expressed condolences for both families, while others speculated about the events and who bore more responsibility. Online commentary was divided, with debates emerging around whether Hickman was justified in his actions, whether Tanasia acted in fear or rage, if mental health awareness and domestic conflict mediation could have changed the outcome. Locally, the Spring, Texas community was largely silent in official statements. No public candlelight vigils or community gatherings were reported. However, smaller conversations about domestic conflict awareness circulated on social platforms like Nextdoor and Reddit. On Reddit forums, threads discussing the case showed polarized views. Some users defended Hickman's actions as self-defense, citing the stab wound. Others questioned whether the gun use was excessive and why he chose suicide instead of cooperating with the investigation. When both individuals in a domestic incident are deceased, how should society determine accountability? No direct warning signs were posted by either Hickman or Bush publicly before February 17th. However, several of their Instagram and Facebook posts, now taken down or locked, showed quotes and content about relationship stress, loyalty, and betrayal. These were not explicit threats, but in retrospect, may have reflected underlying tensions. No reports have confirmed if law enforcement reviewed their digital activity in full. Friends online reference vague captions and stories shared by Tanasia days before her death. One such caption reportedly read, "You never know what someone is really capable of until it's too late." It's unknown whether this was directed at Hickman or reflected general feelings. No post directly referenced violence, weapons, or threats. There were no known mental health declarations made publicly by either party in the weeks leading up to the altercation. Hickman's suicide, however, suggests the possibility of severe emotional distress. Whether he showed signs privately remains unknown. There is no public confirmation that either party deleted posts or messages prior to the incident. Law enforcement has not released any findings from private text conversations or messaging apps. It is unknown whether phones were collected and searched after the incident. Should digital activity be routinely reviewed during domestic cases, even without a surviving suspect? In the days and weeks before the fatal incident that claimed the lives of Phillip Hickman and Tanasia Bush, there were no publicly documented attempts at intervention, either by law enforcement, social services, or close relations. The absence of protective measures or preventative actions raises critical questions about what could have been done differently. There is no confirmed record that friends, family members, or neighbors reported any prior domestic disturbances involving the couple. No known protective orders, police reports, or emergency calls exist in the public domain to suggest prior violence. If there were signs of emotional tension, physical confrontation, or mental instability, they were either overlooked or unreported. This lack of documentation does not necessarily mean warning signs weren't present. In many domestic situations, conflicts remain hidden. Victims may avoid reporting, fearing consequences. Loved ones often choose silence, assuming the matter is private. In hindsight, questions emerge. Did anyone notice behavioral shifts, withdrawal, agitation, or changes in tone or appearance? Did either Phillip or Tanasia confide in someone about stress in the relationship? No evidence has surfaced indicating that the couple sought or were offered counseling. There is no trace of couples therapy, anger management programs, or community support services being engaged. If any such steps were taken privately, they were not acknowledged by law enforcement or family statements post-tragedy. Could legal separation, time apart, or third-party mediation have prevented escalation? Possibly, but with no indication that either party pursued those options, the opportunity for intervention appears to have never fully materialized. As both Phillip Hickman and Tanasia Bush are deceased, no direct testimony exists to clarify their motives or the progression of events. Investigators reported that Bush stabbed Hickman during an argument, prompting him to shoot her. She later died. Hickman survived and was released from the hospital. The following day, he died by suicide in a public school parking lot as his family approached. The available evidence leaves room for multiple interpretations. Was this a murder-suicide? Technically, Hickman was not charged before his death, and police had planned to present the case to a grand jury for review. His shooting of Bush could be legally interpreted as self-defense if corroborated by forensic evidence and physical circumstances. However, the question remains, did his suicide indicate guilt or emotional distress? Did mental health play a larger role than previously acknowledged? There is no public record of Hickman receiving treatment for psychological issues. Still, His decision to end his life just one day after surviving a violent domestic altercation points toward acute emotional collapse. Whether rooted in guilt, trauma, fear of prosecution, or other personal crises remains unclear. Was the suicide spontaneous or premeditated? Police reports do not detail any suicide note or final communications. He was found at a school parking lot with a firearm. That he took his life as his family approached suggests an emotional response in real time, but it doesn't rule out prior planning. The absence of a known suicide plan or mental health diagnosis limits insight into Hickman's frame of mind. Without digital evidence, such as text messages or search history, determining intent is speculative. And most critically, could this outcome have been avoided? If resources like conflict de-escalation, mediation, or even temporary separation had been engaged before the incident, escalation may have been prevented. But without signs being acknowledged or acted upon, any opportunity for conflict resolution was lost. These events raise broader societal questions. Is this a case of justice denied, justice delayed, or justice misinterpreted? With no criminal charges filed and both involved parties deceased, there will be no trial, no cross-examination, and no final judgment. While police initiated an investigation and intended grand jury review, Phillip Hickman's suicide closed the door on legal closure. Who holds responsibility when both lives are lost? Is responsibility shared between the individuals involved? Does the legal system bear any accountability for not holding Hickman post-release? Should family or community members have noticed the signs? These are not questions with simple answers, but they are necessary to ask in the aftermath of such dual loss. The case of Phillip Hickman and Tanasia Bush is defined not by courtroom outcomes, but by silence. A violent dispute turned deadly, a life taken, then another ended by self-inflicted means. With no surviving participants and no legal resolution, this incident falls into a category where conclusions are limited and evidence is static. The facts remain. A domestic argument escalated to violence. A stabbing led to a gunshot. Both individuals died within 24 hours. Law enforcement intended to pursue a grand jury review. No official charges were filed. No intervention was recorded before the events occurred. This case underscores a broader pattern: the hidden volatility of domestic conflict and the frequent absence of early intervention. Without visible warning signs or active third-party involvement, relationships under pressure can spiral quickly into irreversible outcomes. It is not the purpose of this documentary to assign guilt or innocence. The individuals involved can no longer speak for themselves. What remains is a chain of actions, reactions, and missed opportunities. There is no definitive answer, only facts, timelines, and the need to examine patterns that often repeat across similar cases. The loss of both lives, the rapper on a rise and the mother of three, illustrates how domestic tragedies leave no winners. Families mourn on both sides. Children are left without parents. And communities are left questioning how such events continue to unfold without interruption. This story is a call to examine more closely the warning signs that are often dismissed. It's a prompt to understand the value of conflict de-escalation and mental health support. And it's a reminder that when domestic conflict goes unaddressed, the result may be more than just a broken relationship. It may be irreversible loss. What signs are we not paying attention to? What actions can we take before a tragedy forces a question? This case ends without legal closure, public testimony, or detailed forensic reports. Both Phillip Hickman and Tanasia Bush are gone, and their story remains defined by silence, assumptions, and open questions. What should accountability look like when no one is left to answer for what happened? And how do we prepare society to prevent the next double tragedy that begins with a single domestic argument? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe for more true crime cases that raise questions, not just about crime, but about systems, silence, and what justice really means. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, Stay safe and stay aware.